The sun sank slowly into a vast expanse of rippling water, igniting the horizon in brilliant oranges and deep crimsons. At the beach, a stretch of sand that had long been a weekend escape for locals and vacationers alike, the atmosphere was usually carefree, filled with the laughter of children and the casual chatter of families. But that night, when twilight gave way to an unsettling darkness, an event occurred that would forever shatter the idyllic calm. A chill breeze stirred the dunes and sent ripples across the sea. Amid scattered footprints and discarded flip-flops, a solitary figure lay motionless on the sand. No one had noticed him until a lone jogger, her pace interrupted by the sight of something out of place, slowed to a stop. The body of Everett Miles, a maintenance worker known around town for his quiet kindness and unassuming reliability, was sprawled near a weathered driftwood log. His once vibrant eyes stared blankly at the emerging stars, and his clothes, stained with patches of salt and dried blood, clung to his lean frame. Clutched in his hand was a torn scrap of paper, its ink smeared by the damp, reading only "Silence buries secrets." Within minutes, the beach transformed from a serene haven into a flurry of flashing blue lights and hushed voices. Police cruisers rolled in along the shoreline, and uniformed officers, faces set in grim determination, cordoned off the area. Forensic teams in protective suits combed the sand, carefully collecting evidence, the distinct pattern of footprints trailing from the body, a broken shell fragment glistening near his hand, and even a smudge of blood marking the edge of a nearby boulder. Detective Lila Anders, a seasoned investigator with an eye for minute details and a reputation for unconventional methods, arrived as the tide began to wash over the crime scene. The salty air carried with it the tang of mystery and foreboding. Lila's boots left deliberate impressions in the damp sand as she stepped carefully around the body. Every detail was noted: the position in which Everett lay, the faint echo of a struggle suggested by a few scattered personal items, and the note clutched tightly in his grasp. It was clear from the outset that this was not a random act of violence, but a meticulously staged scene, a message delivered in silence. In the days that followed, Detective Anders methodically pieced together Everett Miles's final hours. She began by canvassing the beach and nearby boardwalk, speaking with anyone who might have seen or heard something unusual. Rosa Martinez, a waitress at a seaside cafe, recalled that Everett had come in early that evening for a cup of coffee before setting off on his routine patrol of the public areas. "He was always so friendly," Rosa said softly, her eyes still lingering on the memory. "That night, he looked distracted, as if he was deep in thought. He didn't seem upset, just troubled, like he'd uncovered something that weighed on him." Rosa's recollections were the first hint that Everett had been investigating something before his untimely death. A local vendor selling handmade jewelry near the lifeguard tower offered another clue. "I saw him talking to a man in a dark jacket near the water's edge," the vendor recalled. "They had a brief, heated exchange, but I couldn't catch much." The man walked off quickly into the crowd, leaving Everett looking more tense than usual. The witness's account added a layer of intrigue. Everett might have encountered someone who didn't want him prying further into matters unknown. Detective Anders then obtained a search warrant for Everett's small apartment, a modest unit in a worn building on the outskirts of town. Inside, the atmosphere was heavy with the scent of old paper and a hint of sea salt brought in on the wind. The space was sparsely furnished, a reflection of a man whose life was devoted to a simple routine. On a battered wooden desk tucked against a faded wall, Lila discovered Everett's leather-bound journal. Its pages were yellowed by time, filled with neat, careful entries that began as mundane records of daily tasks. Over the course of several pages, however, the tone shifted dramatically. Everett had documented small observations about the maintenance of public facilities, notes about broken signs and malfunctioning lights along the boardwalk. But in later entries, he recorded something far more unsettling. In one passage, he wrote, "There's a consistent shortfall in the supplies delivered to the maintenance department. Not much on any given day, maybe a screw, a bolt, or a piece of wiring. But over time, the missing parts add up. I suspect someone is deliberately diverting our resources." Another entry, hastily scrawled and nearly illegible, read, "I've compared the digital logs with the original delivery sheets. The numbers are off, small discrepancies that no one would notice unless you look very closely. I fear that if I continue, I'll uncover truths that someone is willing to kill for. The journal ended abruptly, with a few frantic lines trailing off as though Everett had been interrupted mid-thought. At the same time, the department's cyber unit managed to recover fragments of deleted messages from Everett's old smartphone, a device with a cracked screen and a case adorned with faded stickers. Among these were terse exchanges with an unknown contact, using the alias narrated. One fragmented message warned, "Stop digging or you'll drown in your own secrets," while another cautioned, "The tide will turn against you if you persist." The cold, unyielding tone of these digital warnings confirmed what Detective Anders had long suspected. Everett's investigation had attracted the attention of a shadowy figure determined to keep certain truths submerged. Determined to unravel the mystery, Detective Anders expanded her inquiry to include the public records stored in the county office, a musty repository of documents that detailed the town's history in ink and paper. With the help of Mr. Samuel Price, a meticulous records clerk with decades of experience, she began comparing the original handwritten logs with the current digital entries. What emerged was a pattern of subtle alterations, slight changes in numbers, omitted details, and a series of corrections that when viewed in isolation might have seemed insignificant, but collectively, they pointed to a deliberate effort to divert small sums of money from public funds. The discrepancies were most pronounced in the records related to maintenance supplies ordered for the boardwalk and public spaces, exactly the type of records that Everett had been scrutinizing. The evidence suggested a network of corruption, a clandestine scheme where minor adjustments over time had allowed an unknown group to siphon off funds for their own gain. Detective Anders discovered that these diverted funds were being funneled through a series of shell companies and eventually linked to an offshore account registered to a generic corporate entity. The financial trail, painstakingly reconstructed by forensic accountants, was as damning as the physical evidence scattered across the beach. As the investigation deepened, anonymous tips began arriving in Detective Anders' inbox. One email, sent from an untraceable address, read simply, "The sea hides many secrets. Not all are meant to be found." Another text message warned, "If you continue to chase these numbers, you may never resurface." Each cryptic communication added urgency to the case, confirming that whoever was orchestrating the cover-up was not only aware of Everett's probing but was actively working to thwart it. The turning point in the investigation came when federal agents were brought in to assist with both the digital forensics and the financial tracing. Advanced software and painstaking manual reviews revealed a near-complete timeline of the discrepancies, linking the digital deletions on Everett's phone to the alterations in the public records. The numbers were irrefutable. Over the past several years, small amounts had been systematically diverted from the county's maintenance budget, amounts that, though negligible individually, had accumulated into a significant sum. The funds were traced to a shell company with ties to a local supplier known simply as the Warehouse, a business that had long been regarded as a reliable source of materials for public projects. In confidential interviews, former employees of the Warehouse hinted that shipments had frequently arrived with quantities slightly lower than what was invoiced, suggesting that someone had been pilfering the extras for profit. With mounting evidence in hand, Detective Anders compiled her findings into an extensive report, a dossier that combined Everett's frantic journal entries, the reconstructed digital warnings, detailed comparisons of original and revised public records, and testimonies from witnesses who recalled seeing discrepancies at the Warehouse. The report formed a labyrinth of evidence pointing to a deliberate and far-reaching operation, one that had manipulated public records to siphon off funds for an offshore financial network. Recognizing the gravity of the case, the district attorney convened a grand jury in the county courthouse, a venerable brick building that had long been a symbol of local justice. In a series of intense sessions, expert witnesses testified about the sophisticated digital forensics techniques used to recover deleted messages, the meticulous statistical analyses that confirmed the improbability of natural discrepancies, and the historical comparisons that exposed systematic record alterations. Their combined testimony painted a damning picture of corruption that stretched back years, a calculated cover-up designed to divert funds and maintain the status quo, regardless of the cost in human life. After hours of deliberation, the grand jury returned indictments on charges of fraud, conspiracy, and accessory to homicide, directly linking the deliberate manipulation of public records to the murder of Everett Miles. The ensuing trial was a sprawling legal ordeal that unfolded over several weeks in a bustling courtroom. Federal prosecutors presented their case with unwavering clarity, bolstered by vivid digital reconstructions of the deleted messages and meticulous financial charts that illustrated the cumulative misappropriation of funds. Expert witnesses in digital forensics explained how the warnings from narrated had been recovered, their screen images flickering with the stark, unyielding text that had haunted Everett's final days. Forensic accountants revealed intricate graphs showing how minor discrepancies, when summed over time, amounted to a significant diversion from the public budget. Local records clerks testified in hushed tones about the slow, deliberate changes in the historical logs, small edits that over the years had rewritten the town's fiscal history. When Detective Anders took the stand, her testimony was a blend of clinical precision and raw emotion. She recounted the moment she first encountered Everett's body on that rain-streaked beach, the shock in her own eyes, the silent testimony of the torn note clutched in his grasp, and the painstaking process of assembling the disparate pieces of evidence into a coherent narrative. Her voice was measured, yet every word carried the weight of a community betrayed by its own system. As she detailed each piece of evidence, the faded journal entries, the reconstructed messages, the altered numbers in the public records, the courtroom was held in a tense, almost reverent silence, each person acutely aware of the high stakes involved in unveiling the truth. The trial concluded with the conviction of several mid-level administrators, clerks, and technical staff implicated in the systematic record-altering operation. They received long-term prison sentences that sent ripples through the community, serving as a stark reminder of the cost of corruption. Yet many observers noted that the verdict was a partial victory at best. The top conspirators, the architects of the covert scheme who had orchestrated the manipulation from behind layers of power, managed to elude full accountability by exploiting complex legal defenses and the protective barriers of their institutional influence. Their names remained largely redacted from the official documents, leaving a lingering sense of incomplete justice and unanswered questions that would haunt the town for years to come. In the months that followed, the fallout from the trial reshaped the civic landscape of the community. Public officials, now compelled by the collective outrage of the citizens and the relentless media scrutiny, introduced sweeping reforms. The digital systems that housed the public records were overhauled, now fortified with state-of-the-art encryption and regular independent audits. Town meetings grew more frequent and spirited, with residents demanding complete transparency in every transaction and insisting that the history of their community be preserved with the utmost honesty. Independent watchdog groups formed to monitor public records, and local educational institutions incorporated the case into their curricula as a poignant lesson in ethical governance and the relentless pursuit of truth. Documentary filmmakers and investigative journalists produced a series of detailed reports and films that chronicled every twist of the case, from the initial discovery of a lifeless body on the beach to the intricate digital reconstructions that unearthed a network of corruption. The story of Everett Miles, the unassuming maintenance worker who had dedicated himself to protecting public resources, became a rallying symbol for those who believed that no secret, however carefully concealed, should remain buried. Academic seminars and public lectures debated the ethical dimensions of historical record-keeping, while local artists memorialized the tragedy in murals and installations that captured both the beauty of the beach at twilight and the dark stain of injustice. For Detective Lila Anders, the case was a constant reminder of the fine line between order and chaos, between routine and revelation. Even as life on the beach returned to its usual cadence, with sunbathers and swimmers enjoying the cool waters during the day, the memory of that stormy night lingered, a silent testament to a tragedy that had forced a small community to confront the corruption hidden in plain sight. In moments of quiet reflection, Lila would often stand at the edge of the water, watching as the waves lapped against the shore, and recall the final desperate scribbles in Everett's journal. Each wave seemed to carry away fragments of the past, yet the truth remained, etched indelibly in the collective memory of those who had fought for transparency. Years later, as the town continued its slow recovery, the legacy of the investigation endured. Public records that had once been manipulated were now displayed openly in digital archives accessible to every citizen, and rigorous oversight committees ensured that no one could again tamper with the truth. The once silent voices of whistleblowers became the clarion call for accountability, and every public forum, every town hall meeting, was imbued with the resolve to protect the integrity of their shared history. Detective Anders, now a veteran of many cases, carried with her the lessons of that fateful night, a belief that the pursuit of truth was an endless journey, one that required unwavering courage, technical expertise, and a deep respect for the lives lost in the process. Her work continued to inspire new generations of investigators, and her quiet determination served as a beacon of hope for a community that had learned that even the smallest discrepancies, when left unchecked, could eventually reveal a vast network of deception. And as the sun rose on another day at the beach, a place that had witnessed both the beauty of nature and the scars of human ambition, the story of that long-ago investigation was not simply recounted as a tragic mystery, but celebrated as a turning point. It was a chronicle of perseverance, a reminder that every hidden secret, every altered record, and every whispered threat must be met with an unyielding commitment to the truth. The legacy of Everett Miles and the tireless work of Detective Anders became a part of the town's living history, inspiring every new effort to ensure that justice and transparency would forever light the way through even the darkest of times. A bitter wind swept across the abandoned textile mill, rusted metal and crumbling brick a testament to an industry long past its prime. Late afternoon light filtered through broken windows, illuminating swirling motes of dust and the faint, lingering smell of oil and decay. In the cavernous main hall of the mill, a space once filled with the rhythmic clatter of machinery and the murmur of busy workers, an eerie silence now reigned. It was here, among rows of empty looms and toppled stacks of faded cotton bales, that a secret crime was about to be exposed. On that fateful day, Elias Turner, a night security guard with a quiet demeanor and a reputation for unwavering diligence, made his routine patrol. Clad in a threadbare uniform and armed with a flashlight that barely cut through the dark recesses of the building, he moved slowly along corridors where the echoes of industry still whispered in the creaks of old floorboards. As Elias approached a storage room in the rear wing, a place where remnants of raw fabric and dust-choked documents lay undisturbed, he noticed something that made his blood run cold. There, in the dim glow of his beam, lay a body sprawled on a cold concrete slab. The man was slumped against a rusted filing cabinet, his face partially hidden beneath a stained cap. Elias's heart hammered as he stepped closer, his flashlight revealing the victim's still, glassy eyes and the subtle pooling of dark blood on the concrete. Clutched tightly in the victim's hand was a scrap of paper, its surface marred by stains and a hastily scrawled message that read, "Hidden truths never sleep." Elias fumbled for his radio, his voice trembling as he reported the grim discovery. Within minutes, the mill was swarmed by police vehicles, their sirens cutting through the oppressive quiet, and uniformed officers began cordoning off the scene. Detective Nora Delgado arrived just as twilight turned the sky a bruised purple. She stepped carefully over broken glass and scattered debris, her dark eyes absorbing every detail. The precise angle of the victim's limp body, the glint of metal from the nearby cabinet, and the paper that still clung to a calloused hand. There was an unnerving calm about the scene, an almost deliberate placement that suggested the murder had been planned rather than committed in a moment of passion. Detective Delgado's reputation for methodical investigations was well earned, and as she crouched beside the body, she noted the faint outline of footprints leading away from the area, footprints that would become the first thread in a tapestry of clues. The victim was soon identified as Marcus Reed, a maintenance technician employed by the mill before its shutdown. Known for his reliability and a quiet kindness that endeared him to colleagues, Marcus had been responsible for keeping the mill's aging machinery running during its final years. In recent months, however, those who had worked with him mentioned that he had grown unusually introspective, often seen scribbling in a small notebook during his breaks, or peering intently at old ledgers and dusty records. His colleagues recalled that he had begun to ask pointed questions about missing supplies and discrepancies in the mill's financial records, a curiosity that in a place rife with secrets would ultimately prove fatal. Detective Delgado's first step was to interview the few remaining workers who still frequented the mill on occasional shifts. Rosa Mendoza, a longtime cleaner, who had maintained the hallways since the mill was operational, described Marcus as a quiet soul with a passion for details. Rosa recalled, "In the weeks before I noticed him frowning at the supply closet and whispering on the phone. I thought he was upset about something trivial, but now I wonder if he discovered something he shouldn't have." Another worker, an elderly machinist named Leonard, mentioned that Marcus had once confided in him about inconsistencies in the ordering of spare parts that were crucial for the mill's operations, yet always seemed to be just slightly short of what was needed. Determined to uncover the full extent of Marcus's last investigation, Detective Delgado obtained a warrant to search his small apartment, a cramped, sparsely furnished space in a worn building near the mill's perimeter. The apartment was modest, a single room with a bed pushed into a corner, a small table cluttered with newspapers and faded photographs, and a closet filled with a few personal belongings. In a locked drawer of an old desk, the detective found Marcus's leather-bound journal. The notebook's pages, yellowed and frayed, were filled with meticulous entries. Early notes detailed his daily tasks, records of maintenance schedules, and mundane observations about the weather. But as the pages turned, a darker narrative emerged. Marcus had begun documenting subtle discrepancies, mismatched numbers on supply invoices, orders for replacement parts that never arrived, and unexpected gaps in the mill's ledgers. One entry, written in hurried script just 3 days before his death, read, "There are consistent shortages in our supply orders, barely noticeable on any given day, yet over time they add up. I fear someone is deliberately taking what belongs to all of us, and if I keep looking, I might expose a truth that someone will kill to hide." The journal ended abruptly, as if Marcus had been interrupted mid-thought. Concurrently, the department's cyber unit managed to recover fragments of deleted text messages from Marcus's old smartphone, a battered device with a cracked screen and a well-worn protective case. The recovered messages, though incomplete, were laced with terse warnings. One fragment read, "Don't pry or you'll be silenced," while another cautioned, "Stop now before it's too late." The messages, sent by an unknown contact signing only as Sable, confirmed that Marcus's inquiries had provoked a dangerous adversary, one willing to use intimidation, and perhaps violence, to ensure that certain secrets remained hidden. Detective Delgado, now faced with a tangled web of physical and digital clues, turned her attention to the town's public records, stored in the county office, a weathered building lined with filing cabinets and illuminated by harsh fluorescent lights. With the help of a veteran clerk, Mr. Irving Sanders, she began comparing the original, handwritten ledgers with the current digital records. The differences were minute but unmistakable. Small adjustments in numbers, slight alterations in dates, and several instances where the names of suppliers were replaced with vague initials. Taken one by one, these changes might have been dismissed as clerical errors, but collectively, they pointed to a deliberate systematic manipulation of the records. In particular, the discrepancies were most pronounced in the records related to the ordering of machinery parts and maintenance supplies, a category that directly impacted the mill's operations during its final years. The adjustments, when calculated over a span of several fiscal years, represented a substantial diversion of funds. Forensic accountants, brought in to analyze the financial data, discovered that the missing amounts had been funneled into an offshore account linked to a shell corporation. The financial trail, though convoluted, was clear. Someone had been siphoning off small sums over time, and the cumulative effect was a significant misappropriation of resources, a scheme designed not only to enrich its orchestrators, but also to conceal the true state of the mill's declining operations. Detective Delgado expanded her investigation to include interviews with former employees of the mill's supply department. One such employee, a quiet man known only as Arthur, recalled that the mill had once prided itself on its transparency and accuracy in record-keeping. "We used to have nothing to hide," Arthur said, his voice heavy with nostalgia. "But in the last couple of years I noticed that every time we placed an order, the numbers in the official logs were just a bit off. At first I thought it was a glitch in the new computer system, but then I began to suspect that someone was systematically adjusting the figures. I told a few of us to keep quiet, fearing for our jobs, but I can't help thinking that something much bigger was at play." Arthur's testimony lent a personal touch to the cold financial data, suggesting that the discrepancies were not merely technical errors, but part of a deliberate cover-up. As the investigation continued, Detective Delgado received a series of anonymous notes. One handwritten slip, discovered tucked into a file at the county office, read, "The ledger hides more than numbers. Heed the whispers of the past." Another note, delivered to her by a courier with no return address, cautioned, "Stop questioning, or you may find yourself erased." Each note was unsettling in its brevity, and together they confirmed that someone or some group was determined to silence any scrutiny that threatened to expose their operation. With mounting evidence, the detective compiled a comprehensive report, a detailed dossier spanning hundreds of pages that wove together every piece of evidence. Marcus's journal entries, the reconstructed digital messages from Sable, the subtle discrepancies in the public records, and testimonies from workers who had observed the changes firsthand. The report outlined a chilling narrative of gradual corruption, a covert network that had over the years systematically siphoned off small amounts from the mill's maintenance budget, diverting the funds into hidden accounts and leaving the public records forever altered. Federal agents alerted to the potential scope of the scheme joined the investigation. Advanced forensic tools were used to reconstruct the timeline of deleted messages and trace the financial trail through multiple layers of shell companies. The analysis revealed that the diverted funds, though small in individual increments, had accumulated to an amount large enough to indicate a sophisticated long-term plan. The financial evidence was bolstered by digital logs that showed a pattern of remote system logins from a computer terminal registered to the mill's administrative office, a terminal that had been used to issue the subtle adjustments. The digital fingerprints pointed to a particular employee, a mid-level administrator who had been with the mill for nearly a decade. When questioned, he offered vague, evasive answers and claimed that the adjustments were routine corrections. His behavior, combined with the weight of the financial data, suggested that he was intimately involved in the cover-up. Recognizing the gravity of the situation, the district attorney convened a grand jury in the old county courthouse, a time-worn structure of stone and stained glass that had seen countless community disputes resolved through the legal process. In a series of tense sessions that extended late into the night, expert witnesses testified about the digital techniques used to recover the deleted text messages, the forensic accounting methods that mapped out the diverted funds, and the painstaking historical comparisons that revealed the systematic tampering of public records. Their combined testimony left little doubt that the discrepancies were the result of deliberate interference, a carefully orchestrated operation designed to erase inconvenient truths and enrich a hidden cabal. After hours of deliberation, the grand jury returned indictments on multiple charges, including fraud, conspiracy, and accessory to homicide. Several mid-level employees of the mill's administrative department were named in the indictments, their roles in manipulating the records laid bare for public scrutiny. Yet, as often happens in complex schemes, the highest-ranking conspirators managed to evade full exposure by exploiting intricate legal loopholes and remaining shrouded in anonymity. Their names were redacted from the official documents, leaving a bitter taste in the mouths of those who had followed the case closely, a reminder that despite significant progress, some of the darkest corners of the corruption still remained hidden. The trial that ensued was a drawn-out legal battle that drew crowds from across the region. In a courtroom filled with local residents, concerned citizens, and a throng of media representatives, federal prosecutors presented their case with a mix of technical precision and raw, emotional testimony. Digital forensic experts took the stand, their screens displaying vivid reconstructions of the deleted messages that tracked the evolution of threats from Sable. Forensic accountants presented complex graphs that illustrated how the small discrepancies, when summed over years, diverted a sizable portion of the mill's budget to a mysterious offshore account. Local records clerks testified in measured tones about how the public ledgers had gradually been altered, their voices tinged with regret for a system that had once been trusted and now betrayed. Detective Delgado, now a key witness in the trial, delivered her testimony with quiet intensity. She recounted the moment she discovered Marcus Reed's body in the cavernous storage room of the mill, describing the shock that froze her steps and the deliberate nature of every detail. Her narrative was a blend of analytical clarity and personal sorrow, a testament to a life dedicated to uncovering the truth even when it came at a steep price. As she detailed each element, the torn scrap of paper, the final desperate entries in Marcus's journal, the silent footprints in the dust, the courtroom fell into a reflective stillness, each listener absorbing the high cost of the investigation. In the end, the jury returned verdicts that resulted in the conviction of several mid-level operatives directly implicated in the record manipulation scheme. They received long-term prison sentences, and their names were etched into public records as a warning to anyone who would dare tamper with the truth. Yet for many in the community, the judgment was incomplete. The top conspirators, the architects behind the clandestine operation, managed to slip through the cracks of full accountability, their identities obscured by redactions and legal technicalities. The unresolved presence of these shadowy figures left a lingering sense of injustice and a somber realization that the battle for transparency was far from over. After the trial, the once familiar corridors of the mill began to echo with a different rhythm, a new resolve among the townspeople to restore integrity to public records. Local government officials, spurred by the case's revelations and the unyielding demand for accountability, instituted sweeping reforms. A new system for digital record keeping was introduced, incorporating robust encryption and independent audits. Public access to historical records was expanded dramatically, ensuring that every citizen could review the documents that had once been manipulated in secret. In the wake of the trial, the community gathered in town halls and public squares to debate, with passionate speeches and measured discussions, the importance of preserving history unaltered and of safeguarding the public trust. Independent journalists and documentary filmmakers soon launched in-depth investigations into the case, producing films and written reports that dissected every facet of the investigation, from the discovery of the body in the mill's storage room to the painstaking digital reconstructions and financial analyses. Academic conferences featured panels on the ethical implications of record alteration and the power of digital forensics to expose corruption, while local schools incorporated the case into their history and civics curricula as a poignant lesson in the importance of transparency and accountability. For Detective Delgado, the case remained a lifelong reminder that the quest for truth is an ongoing struggle, a process of constant vigilance against the forces that would rewrite history for personal gain. In the quiet solitude of her modest office, where the hum of a computer and the rustle of paper mingled with memories of long-lost evidence, she would often reread Marcus's journal and review the painstakingly reconstructed digital trails. Every recovered fragment was a testament to her determination, a reminder that even the smallest detail could be the key to unraveling a vast web of corruption. As time passed, the legacy of the investigation transformed the town in subtle yet profound ways. The public records, once manipulated by unseen hands, were now a symbol of the community's commitment to truth. Independent oversight committees ensured that no further tampering would go unnoticed, and local educators spoke passionately about the importance of historical integrity. The once haunted memory of the mill and its dark secrets became a catalyst for renewal, a turning point that reawakened the public's belief in justice. In a reflective moment during a community forum held in the county building, a longtime resident summed up the sentiment of the day. "We learned that the past isn't written in stone. It can be changed, but so can it be restored. We have a duty to protect our history, to ensure that every hidden secret is exposed. That's the only way we honor the sacrifices made by people like Marcus Reed and stand against corruption." Her words resonated across the room, a clear, unyielding call for vigilance and truth. Detective Delgado's work continued, each new case approached with the same unwavering focus that had defined this investigation. While the identities of the highest conspirators remained partly hidden, every uncovered discrepancy, every digital trace reinforced the conviction that the truth would eventually prevail. Her career became a quiet testament to the power of perseverance, a reminder that no matter how intricate the web of deceit, the light of inquiry could expose even the most carefully guarded secrets. The story of the mill's dark chapter was neither a neatly packaged victory nor a complete tragedy. It was a complex, ongoing narrative that reshaped the community's understanding of its own history. The evidence, both physical and digital, had forced a reckoning with the past, inspiring new standards for transparency that would safeguard the future. The legacy of the case, built on the determination of one man to uncover the truth and the relentless pursuit of justice by a dedicated detective, lived on in every public record now open for all to see and in every citizen's renewed commitment to accountability. In the end, what began as a solitary discovery in a forgotten storage room had blossomed into a transformative journey, a relentless exploration of truth that echoed far beyond the confines of the old mill. It was a story that defied easy resolution, one that continued to inspire those who believed that no secret, however deeply buried, could remain hidden forever. And as the town moved forward, the memory of that long-ago investigation served as a constant, powerful reminder that the pursuit of truth, even when met with formidable obstacles, is a cause that transforms lives and fortifies the bonds of a community determined to stand for justice. The airport was a living canvas of ceaseless motion and fluorescent energy, its vast terminals alive with the hum of conversations, rolling suitcases, and the occasional overhead announcement. Late on a humid summer evening, amid the constant shuffle of passengers and the scent of coffee and pretzels, a discovery was made that would shatter the routine bustle of air travel and send ripples through the community. In a rarely visited corridor behind a row of duty-free shops, a janitor named Calvin discovered a body slumped in a quiet alcove. The victim, later identified as Nolan Pierce, a mid-level baggage handler known for his quiet dedication and steady smile, lay still on the polished tile floor. His uniform, once crisp, was now disheveled, and his eyes stared blankly upward, frozen in an expression of shock. Clutched in his hand was a torn scrap of paper, its ink smudged by sweat and droplets of rain. The hastily written message read, "Expose nothing or be lost." Calvin's heart pounded as he fumbled for his radio, and soon the corridor filled with the buzz of uniformed officers, their voices measured and determined. Forensic experts, clad in dark coveralls, methodically began to document the scene, photographing every detail, dusting for prints on the torn note, and examining a series of footprints that led away from the body. No violent struggle was evident. Instead, the scene seemed arranged with a chilling deliberateness. Detective Fiona Marsh, recently transferred to the airport's investigation unit, and known for her unconventional methods and relentless pursuit of overlooked clues, arrived on the scene just as dusk melted into night. Her keen eyes took in the stark details, the smooth tile reflecting the occasional flash of a camera, the scattered debris of discarded gloves and coffee cups, and the enigmatic note that hinted at a secret someone was determined to keep hidden. Fiona crouched beside Nolan's body, her gloved hands carefully recording observations in a small notebook. Every minute detail, the angle of his fallen body, the pattern of prints trailing into a darkened service corridor, and the barely legible message clutched in his hand, suggested that the incident was not a random act but a premeditated effort to silence someone. Over the following days, Fiona marshaled her team and began reconstructing Nolan Pierce's final hours. Interviews with coworkers and passengers offered the first fragile threads of a story. Jeremy, a check-in agent with a penchant for friendly banter, recalled seeing Nolan near the baggage claim area moments before closing. "He looked distracted," Jeremy said. "Normally he'd be chatting with us, laughing about some small joke. That night, though, he kept checking his phone like he was expecting a message he shouldn't have." Meanwhile, a fellow baggage handler, Simone, recalled that Nolan had mentioned something in passing about numbers not adding up in the shipment records for luggage handling equipment, a detail that at the time had seemed trivial. Curious about these remarks, Fiona obtained a warrant to search Nolan's modest apartment, located in a low-rise building not far from the airport. The space was sparse, a single room with a small bed, a cluttered desk, and a window that overlooked a quiet back street. Among a jumble of personal items, Fiona discovered a leather-bound notebook hidden under a stack of faded photographs. Its pages, yellowed by time, revealed a detailed log of Nolan's observations over the past several weeks. Early pages were filled with routine notes, lists of equipment he'd checked, times he'd clocked in, and mundane reminders for the next day. He began noting subtle discrepancies in the delivery schedules of essential parts for the baggage handling system, small items missing from orders, minor differences between what was documented and what he saw in person. One entry, dated just 3 days before his death, read, "There's a pattern in the numbers, slight shortfalls that no one would notice individually, but they add up. I fear someone is pilfering supplies, and if I follow it too far, they might decide to silence me." The entry ended abruptly, leaving a void where further explanation might have been. Digital forensic experts also retrieved fragments of deleted text messages from Nolan's rugged cell phone. The recovered messages were terse and ominous. One message, partially reconstructed, warned, "Don't pry too deep, or you'll be out of the picture." Another warned, "Stop now, keep quiet or vanish." The messages, sent from an unknown number, using the alias Shade, confirmed that Nolan had been receiving explicit threats, warnings that someone with power was monitoring his investigations and was determined to keep the discrepancies hidden. Fiona's investigation then shifted focus toward the airport's internal records. With permission from airport management, she began reviewing the digital logs that tracked equipment orders, maintenance reports, and daily operational budgets. Working with a seasoned records clerk, Martin, whose deep knowledge of the system spanned decades, Fiona painstakingly compared the current digital entries with archival copies stored on older servers. What emerged was a series of minuscule adjustments, a few percentage points missing here, slight numerical discrepancies there. Taken individually, these variances might have been chalked up to data entry errors, but over time, they formed a systematic pattern of resource diversion. The cumulative effect was staggering. Funds that should have gone to replacing worn-out machinery and maintaining safety standards were inexplicably short, with the missing amounts disappearing into a labyrinth of financial transactions linked to a shell company. The financial trail led Fiona to a local supplier known simply as the Warehouse, a modest establishment that had long provided the airport with essential parts and supplies. Publicly, the Warehouse was celebrated for its efficiency and reliability, but when Fiona interviewed a veteran employee there, he admitted that shipments often arrived with quantities slightly lower than what the invoices indicated. "I always thought it was just a minor error," the man explained, "but then I noticed it was happening consistently. It wasn't just a mistake, it was like someone was taking a small cut every time." His testimony lent credence to Fiona's growing suspicion that a deliberate scheme was in place to siphon off resources. At this point, the threads of the investigation began to converge. Fiona assembled all her findings: Nolan's journal entries, the reconstructed digital warnings from Shade, the systematic discrepancies in the digital records, and the testimonies from employees at both the airport and the Warehouse, into a comprehensive report. The dossier, thick with evidence and handwritten notes, detailed a deliberate manipulation of the airport's operational data, designed to misdirect funds and obscure true inventory levels. It was a covert operation carried out over months, perhaps years, by an unknown group of insiders. Meanwhile, anonymous tips began arriving in Fiona's inbox. One email, sent from an untraceable address, stated simply, "Numbers hide no secrets forever." Another text message warned, "Cease your inquiry, or the final count will be yours." The messages were succinct and carried an air of finality that left little room for doubt. Someone was determined to stop the investigation at all costs. Realizing the broader implications of her findings, Detective Marsh, Fiona's superior, arranged for federal agents specializing in digital forensics and financial analysis to join the investigation. Their advanced software and meticulous manual reviews reconstructed a near-complete timeline of the deleted messages, pinpointing the escalation of threats in the final days before Nolan's death. The forensic accountants mapped out the discrepancies in the records, revealing that the cumulative shortfall was not random but an intentional siphoning of funds that led to an offshore account registered to a shell corporation associated with a network known only by its initials. Although the identities behind RA remained obscured by legal redactions, the financial evidence was irrefutable. With federal involvement and the weight of digital and financial data behind her, Fiona compiled an exhaustive report spanning hundreds of pages, a mosaic of evidence that wove together every piece of the puzzle, from the grim discovery at the terminal to the final desperate entries in Nolan's journal. The report was submitted to the district attorney in a series of confidential briefings, its contents a stark indictment of the systematic cover-up that had not only robbed the airport of essential funds, but had ultimately claimed a life. The district attorney, recognizing the gravity of the situation and the potential ramifications for public trust, convened a grand jury at the county courthouse, a venerable building with imposing columns and a long history of upholding justice. In several tense sessions that stretched late into storm-driven nights, expert witnesses testified about the digital techniques used to recover the deleted messages, the forensic accounting methods that traced the flow of diverted funds, and the painstaking historical comparisons that revealed the systematic alterations in the records. Their combined testimony painted a damning picture over a period of years. Small, deliberate adjustments had diverted thousands of dollars from the airport's maintenance budget to obscure sources. Finally, after hours of deliberation, the grand jury returned indictments on multiple charges, including fraud, conspiracy, and accessory to homicide, directly linking the manipulation of the records to the murder of Nolan Pierce. The ensuing trial unfolded in a courtroom abuzz with tension and anticipation. Federal prosecutors presented their meticulously organized case, supported by digital forensic specialists who showcased vivid reconstructions of the deleted messages on large screens. Forensic accountants detailed elaborate graphs that demonstrated how minor discrepancies, when aggregated, revealed a deliberate financial diversion. Local records clerks testified in measured tones about the slow, imperceptible alterations in the public logs, while expert witnesses in digital communications described the chilling tone and escalation of threats captured in the messages from Shade. Each piece of evidence was presented in a series of carefully constructed segments that allowed the jury to follow the labyrinthine path of the investigation, from the initial discovery at the airport corridor to the complex web of financial and digital data. Detective Fiona Marsh took the stand with quiet determination, recounting the harrowing events with a clarity that was both technical and deeply personal. Her narrative did not follow a linear path but flowed through memories of that night, the echo of footsteps in the corridor, the flash of a neon sign reflecting off wet pavement, the heavy silence that had enveloped the scene. She detailed her examination of Nolan's journal, the reconstructed digital messages, and the painstaking process of correlating them with the public records. Her testimony was punctuated by moments of silence, as if she were weighing the full cost of the truth against the gravity of the evidence. The jury listened intently as she described how every minor discrepancy and every ominous warning had converged to form a compelling case of systematic corruption, a case that had claimed a life because one man dared to question the official narrative. When the verdict was finally rendered, several mid-level administrators and technical operatives were convicted on charges of fraud and conspiracy. They were sentenced to long-term prison terms, their names inscribed in the public record as a warning to anyone who might attempt to manipulate the truth. Yet, for many in the community, the resolution was bittersweet. The most influential figures behind the operation, those who had orchestrated the cover-up from behind a wall of corporate power, managed to elude complete exposure by exploiting legal technicalities. Their identities remained hidden behind redacted documents, leaving an enduring gap that served as a somber reminder that even when justice is partially served, some mysteries may persist. In the wake of the trial, the atmosphere at the airport underwent a subtle yet significant transformation. Officials, now under intense public scrutiny, overhauled the digital systems for record-keeping, installing robust security measures and instituting regular independent audits. The changes were not instantaneous, but over time the trust of the traveling public began to rebuild. New protocols ensured that every adjustment in the maintenance logs was thoroughly documented and accessible for review, and a dedicated oversight committee was established to monitor all financial transactions. Local media outlets, galvanized by the case, produced in-depth investigations and documentaries that captured the intricate details of the investigation, from the initial discovery of a body in a shadowy corridor to the painstaking reconstruction of digital evidence that revealed a covert network of corruption. Academic seminars and public lectures, held in community centers and local colleges, featured the case as a profound lesson in the ethical implications of digital record-keeping and the necessity of transparency in public institutions. The narrative of Nolan Pierce, a quiet guardian of operational integrity, became a symbol of the ongoing battle against corruption and the enduring importance of accountability. Detective Marsh's work continued, even as she faced new challenges. Each day as the airport buzzed with the constant rhythm of arrivals and departures, she recalled the painstaking process that had revealed the dark underbelly of the institution she had once believed to be infallible. In moments of solitude, she reviewed the recovered fragments of digital warnings and the faded pages of a journal that had once been a testament to one man's quest for truth. Every uncovered detail reinforced her conviction that no secret, however meticulously concealed, could remain hidden forever. The case reshaped not only the internal workings of the airport, but also the broader community's commitment to transparency. Passengers, once unaware of the hidden manipulations, began to discuss the importance of public oversight and the role of digital forensic technology in holding powerful interests accountable. Community activists rallied for reforms in public record management, and a local committee was established to review the airport's procedures, ensuring that every discrepancy would be addressed promptly. Years later, the legacy of the investigation persisted as a living reminder of the transformative power of truth. The digital systems that once allowed for silent manipulation were now robust, secure, and open to public scrutiny, symbolizing a hard-earned victory over those who sought to bury secrets in the shadows. The story of Nolan Pierce continued to be recounted in hushed yet determined tones at community gatherings, in newspaper columns, and even in academic studies that examined how even the smallest details could expose vast networks of corruption. For Detective Fiona Marsh, every new case became a tribute to that fateful night, a commitment to the unyielding pursuit of truth that, despite the obstacles and losses, would never waver. Her journey through a labyrinth of digital clues and hidden financial trails had redefined her career, imprinting on her a deep sense of duty that resonated with every record reviewed and every anonymous tip followed. In a final reflective moment during a quiet winter afternoon, as sunlight streamed through frosted windows in her modest office, Detective Marsh paused to look at a photograph of a bustling airport terminal from years ago, a reminder of both the chaos and the beauty of human movement. That image, infused with the energy of countless journeys, now served as a testament to the fact that even amidst the hum of everyday life, the relentless pursuit of truth could expose the darkest corners of human ambition. The investigation at the airport, with its intricate web of digital evidence, financial anomalies, and whispered threats, was not simply a chronicle of a single tragedy. It was an evolving narrative, a story of the power of meticulous inquiry, the bravery of a man who refused to be silenced, and the ongoing struggle for accountability in a world where every record and every message held the potential to reshape our understanding of the truth. And in that constant, determined pursuit, the legacy of Nolan Pierce and the unwavering dedication of those who fought for justice continued to illuminate the path forward, guiding future generations to question, to investigate, and to ensure that no hidden secret would ever remain undiscovered. In a bright afternoon, the mall shimmered with energy. Sunlight streamed through the high-ceilinged atrium, illuminating polished tile floors and a mosaic of bustling storefronts. Shoppers meandered between trendy boutiques and cafes, while a lively mix of chatter and distant music filled the air. Amid the everyday hum, no one could have predicted that this ordinary scene would soon unravel into a complex web of secrets, betrayal, and a tragedy that would haunt the community for years. At precisely 3:17 p.m., when the food court was at its peak, and families enjoyed ice cream cones in the gentle heat, a janitorial supervisor named Devon noticed something amiss near a row of closed kiosks. A body lay slumped beside a potted plant on the polished floor near a central corridor. The victim, later identified as Calvin Morgan, had been a beloved custodian of the mall, a quiet man known for his reliability and his warm smile that greeted every early morning sweep. Now, he lay motionless, his eyes staring unseeingly upward, his hands frozen as if caught in a final desperate gesture. In his grasp was a torn scrap of paper, its ink running in dark rivulets, bearing a single cryptic sentence: "The past is never forgotten." Devon's heart pounded as he dialed 911. Within minutes, the normally vibrant corridor fell under the watchful presence of uniformed officers and forensic specialists. The police tape fluttered in the conditioned air as experts documented every detail: the subtle impression of footprints in the glossy tile, a smear of blood near the victim's hand, and even the slight, almost imperceptible trace of cigarette ash left on a nearby bench. The shock rippled through the mall, and everyday life disrupted by a murder that seemed to carry a deliberate message. Detective Fiona Ramirez, recently assigned to the Urban Crimes Unit, arrived on the scene with a determined gaze that hinted at a mind honed to uncover the smallest inconsistencies. Her footsteps were measured as she stepped over the threshold into the now silent corridor. Unlike many of her colleagues, Fiona did not rush to fill the silence with chatter. Instead, she absorbed the details, committing each nuance to memory. The victim's body, arranged with a meticulous finality, and the torn note suggested not a spontaneous act of violence, but one executed with cold purpose, a deliberate silence meant to deter further inquiry. In the hours that followed, Fiona's investigation took on an almost forensic precision. Rather than follow a linear timeline, she began to piece together the story through fragments, witness statements, digital logs, and snippets of conversation that together formed a mosaic of hidden truths. Her first interview was with a security guard, Malik, who had been stationed near the food court. Malik described how he had noticed Calvin's absence from his usual cleaning rounds, and how, when he went to check, he discovered the body lying near a closed kiosk. "I always knew him," Malik recalled, his voice low. "Calvin was the kind of man who never missed a day. When I saw him like that, it just didn't add up. And the note, it gave me chills." Next, Fiona spoke with Jasmine, a barista at one of the bustling cafes on the lower level. Jasmine remembered seeing Calvin earlier that day, methodically tidying up the walkway outside the store, his expression unusually pensive. "He'd been on the phone a lot, almost as if he was tracking something," she said. "I remember him frowning and looking at his watch, like he was waiting for a sign. I never imagined that it would end like this." Jasmine's recollections, though vague, hinted at a side of Calvin that few had seen, a man who had become troubled by something he had witnessed or discovered during his work. As the investigation deepened, Fiona obtained a search warrant for Calvin's small apartment, a modest unit tucked away in an aging building near the mall. The space was sparse and utilitarian, decorated with a few personal mementos, a photograph of a smiling family, a worn baseball cap, and a stack of newspapers that had been carefully kept. In the narrow confines of his desk drawer, Fiona discovered Calvin's leather-bound journal. Its pages, slightly yellowed with age, detailed his routine work and, later, a gradual unraveling of his inner thoughts. Early entries were factual, documenting his daily schedules, his meticulous notes on maintenance routes, and mundane observations about the shifting weather. However, the tone shifted noticeably in entries written in the last week before his death. In one entry, Calvin wrote, "I've noticed a pattern in the supply logs for the cleaning materials. Every delivery is just slightly short. At first I chalked it up to human error, but now I think it's deliberate. There's a series of small adjustments that, when added up, could hide a massive discrepancy." His handwriting, normally steady, began to show signs of urgency, with scribbles in the margins and a series of exclamation marks peppering the page. The final entry was cut abruptly, trailing off with a single-sentence fragment. "If they know I'm onto." The abruptness suggested that he had been interrupted, perhaps even threatened. At the same time, Fiona's team managed to recover fragments of deleted text messages from Calvin's mobile phone, a device with scuffed keys and a screen with a faint crack. Among these messages were terse exchanges with a mysterious correspondent using the pseudonym Obsidian. One recovered text read, "Stop probing, or you'll disappear," while another said, "Dig no deeper, some truths are better left in the dark." The tone of these messages was devoid of warmth, a cold mechanical threat that left no room for ambiguity. The digital evidence confirmed Fiona's growing suspicion. Calvin had been on the verge of uncovering something significant, and someone with power was determined to keep the truth hidden. Fiona's next step was to trace the origin of the discrepancies in the mall's maintenance records. With permission from the mall management, she began an exhaustive review of the digital logs and paper records that tracked supply orders and maintenance schedules. Working with a veteran records clerk named Arnold, a man whose graying hair and steady hands had overseen these documents for decades, Fiona compared the current digital entries with archived paper records stored in a secure filing room in the county office. What emerged was a series of subtle but persistent differences on several occasions. The official records showed that deliveries of cleaning supplies were complete, while the original logs indicated that small amounts, just a few units here and there, were missing. These variances, though nearly imperceptible on any single day, when aggregated over months, amounted to a significant diversion of funds. The financial trail, pieced together by forensic accountants, revealed that the cumulative shortfall had been redirected into an offshore account associated with a shell corporation. The diverted amounts were modest on a day-to-day basis, but over the span of a year, they totaled a sum large enough to suggest that a deliberate scheme was at work. A scheme that was not merely about mismanagement, but about corruption and the systematic suppression of accountability. At this point, Fiona began receiving anonymous tips. One handwritten note, delivered to her at the county office on a rainy afternoon, warned simply, "Numbers hide what you seek." Another text, sent from an untraceable burner phone, cautioned, If you chase these discrepancies, you'll vanish without a trace. The anonymous warnings, cryptic yet unmistakably threatening, confirmed that those behind the record manipulation were aware of the investigation and were prepared to act to keep their secrets safe. The threads of the case began to converge when forensic analysts discovered a pattern in the digital logs of the maintenance system. The discrepancies were not random but followed a predictable, recurring schedule, always coinciding with certain times of the month when deliveries were processed. The software's audit trail indicated that the adjustments had been made remotely by an account registered to an individual within the mall's administration, a mid-level supervisor named Jerome. Jerome's official records showed nothing out of the ordinary, but when questioned by Fiona, he became evasive. In a brief interview, he insisted, "Those are just routine adjustments, nothing more." His vague responses and the subtle tension in his eyes suggested that he might be hiding something far more substantial than routine clerical errors. With mounting evidence in hand, Detective Fiona Ramirez compiled a comprehensive report that detailed every piece of the puzzle: the torn note found with Calvin, the desperate entries in his journal, the reconstructed digital warnings, and the systematic discrepancies in the maintenance records that funneled funds into a hidden account. The dossier, a thick, meticulously organized file, was presented to the district attorney in a series of confidential briefings. Its contents painted a damning portrait of a deliberate cover-up, a network of insiders who had exploited the mall's administrative system for personal gain, and who had ultimately silenced a man who dared to expose their scheme. Recognizing the far-reaching implications of the case, not just for the mall but for the entire community, the district attorney convened a grand jury at the county courthouse, a drab utilitarian building that had witnessed countless legal proceedings over the years. In a series of long, tense sessions that stretched late into storm-riven evenings, expert witnesses testified about the digital forensic techniques used to recover deleted messages, the rigorous statistical analyses that confirmed the improbability of random errors, and the painstaking historical comparisons that revealed deliberate alterations in the records. The combined testimony left little room for doubt. The discrepancies were engineered, and the financial trail was unmistakable. After lengthy deliberations, the grand jury returned indictments on multiple charges, including fraud, conspiracy, and accessory to homicide, charges that directly tied the manipulation of public records to the tragic death of Calvin Morgan. The trial unfolded over several weeks in a crowded courtroom, its atmosphere electric with anticipation and somber determination. Federal prosecutors presented their case with unwavering clarity, interweaving digital reconstructions with detailed financial charts and eyewitness testimonies. A digital forensics expert demonstrated how the deleted messages from Obsidian had been painstakingly recovered and how their tone had grown increasingly menacing as the investigation progressed. Forensic accountants displayed intricate graphs that revealed how small discrepancies, when aggregated, diverted a substantial sum of money. Local records clerks testified in hushed tones about the gradual, almost imperceptible changes in the public logs, a slow rewriting of history that betrayed a hidden agenda. When Detective Ramirez took the stand, her testimony was marked by quiet precision and heartfelt resolve. She recounted in vivid detail the moment she had discovered the body in the deserted corridor of the mall, the shock that had gripped her as she documented every detail of the scene. The careful recovery of Calvin's journal from his modest apartment, and the relentless effort to correlate digital evidence with physical records. Her words, delivered in a steady, measured cadence, conveyed not only the technical aspects of the case, but also the profound human cost of corruption. As she spoke of the anonymous threats and the systematic diversion of funds, the courtroom fell into a reflective silence, a shared understanding of the gravity of what had been uncovered. The trial concluded with the conviction of several mid-level administrators and technical staff who had been directly implicated in the manipulation of the maintenance records. They received lengthy prison sentences, and their names were forever recorded as cautionary tales of what happens when power is abused. However, the verdict was met with mixed emotions. The highest-ranking conspirators, the architects behind the covert scheme, managed to avoid full exposure by leveraging complex legal defenses and the protective shield of institutional power. Their identities remained largely obscured in the final public records, a lingering reminder that while a measure of justice had been served, the full extent of the corruption might never be completely revealed. In the aftermath of the trial, the atmosphere in the mall slowly began to change. Officials, under the relentless pressure of public scrutiny, overhauled the administrative systems that had once been exploited to manipulate the records. New digital security protocols were instituted, and independent audits of all transactions became mandatory. The mall, a symbol of everyday life and commerce, was gradually restored to a state of transparency and accountability, a stark contrast to the shadowed corridors where a quiet life had been snuffed out. Local media produced a series of in-depth investigative reports that recounted the case in rich detail, from the first shocking discovery on that humid afternoon to the painstaking digital reconstructions and the dramatic courtroom revelations. Community forums and town hall meetings were held in a repurposed community center where citizens debated the ethical implications of digital record keeping and the enduring importance of transparency in public institutions. The story of Calvin Morgan, a maintenance technician whose dedication to his job led him to uncover a dangerous secret, became a rallying cry for those who believed that every hidden detail deserved to be scrutinized and every discrepancy, no matter how small, had the potential to reveal a larger truth. For Detective Fiona Ramirez, every new case was approached with a lingering memory of that fateful day, a reminder that beneath the surface of ordinary life, even in places as unremarkable as a bustling shopping mall, secrets can fester and corruption can thrive. In the quiet solitude of her office, with the soft glow of a computer screen illuminating stacks of case files, she reread Calvin's journal and reviewed the painstakingly reconstructed digital messages. Each fragment of evidence, each carefully noted anomaly, was a testament to the belief that the pursuit of truth is an ongoing, often perilous journey, a journey that can ultimately transform communities and restore public trust. Years later, as the mall's neon lights buzzed overhead and shoppers filled the corridors once again, the legacy of the investigation continued to resonate. The newly instituted oversight measures and rigorous audits had become a source of local pride, a public commitment to ensuring that the records of the past remained untouched by those with hidden agendas. In classrooms, community centers, and public forums, the case was discussed as a stark lesson in accountability, transparency, and the transformative power of diligent inquiry. The memory of Calvin Morgan lived on in every review of the public logs and every determined question asked by citizens unwilling to let corruption slip into silence. And while the names of the highest-ranking conspirators remained elusive, their shadow served as a constant reminder that the fight for truth is never truly over. Every inconsistency, every deleted message, every anonymous tip reinforced the resolve of those who sought to keep the public record pure. Detective Ramirez's work, marked by a quiet but unyielding dedication to uncovering hidden details, inspired a new generation of investigators, ensuring that even in the midst of everyday routine, vigilance against corruption would never falter. Thus, the case that began with a solitary body, discovered on a busy mall corridor, transformed into a defining moment for the entire community, a turning point that reshaped administrative systems, strengthened public trust, and underscored the unwavering belief that every hidden secret, no matter how carefully obscured, must eventually emerge into the light.